welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we start this show on a good note. The Adani Group, led by Gautam Adani, has applied for an asset reconstruction company license with the Reserve Bank of India. This means, of course, a lot of companies are going to get their debts bought, because Adani Group, in a sense, will acquire distressed assets in the infrastructure space. We all know there is a lot of bad debt in the infrastructure space. There are a lot of unresolved payment issues with the NHAI and other issues. So that's where they will come in. As also in the real estate space, we have noticed in the past 4 years, real estate hasn't been doing well and needs a lot of money. I think that's where this ARC will come in. So taking with Adani, we will now discuss this space of ARC and its potential in India. I've got a very eminent panel with me who will discuss this issue. I have with me Mohit Saraf. He's managing partner of Saraf and Partners. Welcome, Mr. Saraf. I have with me Mr. Manu Chadha. Welcome, Mr. Manu Chadha, for the first time on Legally Speaking. It's a pleasure to see you, and hopefully for many more. And Mr. Chadha, as I may introduce you today, is a practicing CA, is a qualified lawyer, and has been on the boards of various banks, mutual funds, insurance companies, and AIFs. And he will bring in the financial angle on today's discussion in terms of India's economy and the potential of ARCs. I have with me Ruby Ahuja. She's senior partner with Karanjawala and Company, one of India's leading litigation law firms. Thank you so much, Ruby, for joining us today. Let us begin with the opening comment. May I request Mr. Mohit Saraf to give his opening comment on the Adani story?
As the economy grows, NPAs will actually grow along with the economy. And I think we have been all knowing that the Indian economy is moving to a $5 trillion and then to $10 trillion. And therefore, you need to have an effective mechanism of NPA resolution. Government has come up with bad bank. And ARC is really something which has been on. I think the government has been moving it on almost like 18 years without not that much of success. And the problem was that the legal framework really did not work. Now, I think what is really important is there are few things which is really changing, because I think a lot of people invested in ARC, they looked at the options. But capital raising for ARC wasn't always a big problem. And therefore, if you're talking about $1 trillion of NPAs, the ability for ARC to buy big debt, non-performing asset was very limited because they could not raise capital. Now, that is what has been getting sorted out. At least in some of the discussion papers with RBI say that they can actually have a tap through AIF, and which solves a lot of liquidity issue for ARC. That's the one aspect. The second aspect was that if you look at, like Ruby and I worked on the ArcelorMittal resolution plan, like an SR Steel resolution plan, there were hundreds of creditors holding small shares and small equity stake. And those consolidation was a big issue. Now government is again thinking about that how an ARC can get a majority shares in one of the stressed assets. And that is again going to change dramatically. That is the second thing. And if you look at Adani as a group, I think they are expert in resolving crisis. They have been players in large ports and airports where they have bought stressed assets and resolved it. Now, the third big aspect is that now what is being talked about, the ARC can actually be a resolution applicant. That means they can come up with a framework and resolve the creditor issue. And therefore, I would say it's a fit case for somebody who can resolve insolvency, resolve NPA issues, and get stressed asset back on track. And therefore, I am not surprised that with these changes on at least being on a discussion stage, that Adani as a group has actually requested RBI for a license. So I'm pretty excited. And eventually, if you look at Adani, they have been players in the Diwan housing, they have been players in the Mumbai airport, they have been players in the Krishnapatnam airport, the Diggy Airport, a lot of these projects, and therefore they understand. So therefore, if they have that ability, and then obviously you can see a much better situation. And again, remember, whether it's an ARC, there are 25, 26 ARC in the country, whether it's a bad bank, the bank's problem will be solved if there is a competition. And I think this is where we are getting into a market-driven model which will resolve insolvencies.
Okay, thanks so much for sharing that perspective, Mr. Saraf. I'll go to Mr. Manu Chadda. Your opening comment on this issue.
So I'll just take the viewers back into history. First, as you know, we had the BFR in 1985. So we go back a long time. And then we had in 2001, we had the corporate debt restructuring scheme. Then we had the SARFAESI Act, which came in 2002. That was the time the ARC started. Of course, then in 2015-16, we had the RBI SDRs and S4A where they could restructure it. And the provisioning norms, prudential norms were met. Actually, the game changed when the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has come in, 2016. So like Mohit said, NPAs are large. They will continue to rise with the growth in the economy. There will be business failures. There will be very large borrowers, but you could have instances where businesses do fail. Market conditions change. So what do? We need somebody who's been running good businesses, who have leadership qualities, who have high management tool. If they take over these assets and actually turn them around, I think this win-win for all. Banks' balance sheets are cleaned up. The investors in ARC get a good return. The company, if it's brought on track, government keeps getting revenue and taxes. The employees' salaries are protected. And a national asset is brought into productive use. So we need groups, successful groups like Adani and others, who have been managing assets very well. And very important thing is, in this budget also, government has set up now an NARCL. I don't know whether you're aware. It's a national, asset reconstruction company limited. And they've guaranteed 30,000 crores of the security receipts, which it will borrow from the bank. They will put in 15%. 85% will be SRs issued by this national ARC, which the government is guaranteeing. So government is giving a push for it. And as I was going through, I find that a very large number of foreign players, foreign banks, stress asset funds, global pension funds, they are increasingly now subscribing to the ARC financial model. And this AIF coming in now, I think it will piggy bank and we'll get the funds to support bank resolution. And like Mohit said, there is now a new committee which was headed by Sudarshan Sen, former ED. He says the committee said we must resolve bad loan quickly. And if 66% of the lenders by value agree to sell to ARC, then everybody must agree with transparent process within 60 days. So if we can resolve, if you keep the debt hanging for years, obviously there is bound to be erosion, there is bound to be diminution in valuation, large impairments. So the moment a company gets sick, get hold of all the lenders together and restructure it.
Okay, that's a good point. I'll go to Ruby Ahuja at this point. Now, I want to know from you two things. A, there is some kind of pendency that we see in the NCLT. With the ARCs coming into play, I think that pendency will not be overburdened now because a lot of things will be resolved pre the insolvency process, Do you think that's a boon with players like Adani coming into fray?
I think, of course, there will be some slight advantage which does come if, players like Adani come into ARC business or get a license which they have applied for. Because you'll have to, understand that it brings a more structured approach of a large business house. It is not divested. Earlier, what used to happen that, if Bhushan Steel is going into insolvency, you have a company of a larger group only focusing there. But, with Adani's who have expanded their footsteps from gas to port to FMCG and power. So they have a more niche advantage of investing in any sector they want to because they do bring the expertise. And as everybody else said on the panel, a big commercial business house, whether it is Adani's or Tata's, of that level, they also have more buffer for losses. if one investment is not good, they can consume those losses better. So I think that it's a perfect step, and this government has been trying to resolve the bad debt problem now for a while, and I think this will be good. But to answer your specific question, well, I wouldn't say that it will take away the pendency problem which is there in NCLT and NCLT, and Tarun, of all the people, that why that problem is there. There are other reasons for those pendency issues. But yes, as I said, that when there is a more structured approach to it by a company which has already invested into various businesses, things falling into delay and all, certain things will be resolved without going to court, without anything becoming a dispute for no reason at all, because they do have those expertise to do that and resolve a business problem. So and if the ARCs can also become a resolution applicant now, I think nothing better than that.
Okay.
That is a very
and this may, ma'am, this may spur other big industrial houses in the country to apply for ARCs. Looking at the Adani example, other industries would want to.
Of course, then that's what I said. That's it. Today it is Adani, then tomorrow there'll be others also. And a business, what happens that, when there are losses, you need somebody who can consume them, who has a buffer to bear them for some years at least, till the time that company goes on its own, stands on its own feet again. So all these big business houses bring that advantage. They have the financial backing to do that. So I think that it's good, but whether it will help the delays in NCLT and NCLT, I think there are other problems which we are facing.
Point well taken. I'll go to Mr. Mohit Saraf. In the infrastructure space, I've been interacting with promoters, and they say payments from NHAI are stuck. So there is a lot of problem of NPAs, and there are other reasons also. In the real estate space, the demands has not been particularly, high. That also leads to NPAs. With Adani coming into play in this space, and then with other industrial groups also may eye, do you see that this area for India will see a lot of traction in next 3-4 years, where a lot of good assets will be available at a good bargain price to be, in a sense, snapped up by these ARCs?
If you look at the Indian market, stressed assets have always been available at a bargain price. If you see the haircut, they have all been. Where is the problem is that people have not been able to resolve. Getting is not a problem. I think ARCs and different ARCs have bought it at a fraction of the fair value, but they've not been able to resolve, and therefore there has been further deterioration. Now we need players who understand stressed market, who have an ability, like you have Rothschild globally, that they have an ability to buy stressed companies and turn it around. Now you need those players. I think in India, like whether you Adani and Tata's, as what Ruby said, and other, they have that ability. They have done a number of acquisitions and turn it around. So therefore, what we need is somebody who have the ability to buy and turn it around. So now what we are doing is really the ARC, as what Manu just said, that at least in the draft proposal, there is an ability that one ARC can buy 100% of the debt. If 66% of the lenders support it, then it can go to one ARC, and it is binding on 100% creditors. That's number one. And if they do not, then they have to do 100% provisioning in 1 year. So that is actually, in a way, will act in a way for banks to resolve it quickly. So therefore, what you're seeing is you have a group which have done 7-8 big deals and resolved stress in a very short.
Mr. Saraf, one quick question. Now, both you, in your personal capacity, as well as Ruby Ahuja, have done 2 big cases. That was the SR and Lakshmi Mittal Steel deal. And you both also did the Bhushan Steel deal. You were involved in various capacities. How different it is dealing with an ARC as opposed to dealing with a takeover from a same sector company via NCLT? How the process is different?
The process is the same. Process, nothing changes. And I think I have done almost 8 deals out of the dozen deal, the dirty dozen deal. So we have involved in a lot of these deals. The process is the same. I think what is important is if an ARC has an ability to buy 100% debt quickly, then what it happens is that delay process can be taken care of. That's number one. And it becomes binding. So therefore, if you remember a lot of these things, the one creditor is fighting against the other creditor, that issue gets sorted out. That is one aspect. The second is that you have an ability, really, you have an ability of a group to resolve it quickly. And therefore, people who are holding receipts, and they can get upside. And therefore, in that situation, it will be a win-win for everybody. But having said that, there is also a possibility of a conflict of interest. And I think when you have a big industrial group who's actually, if he's trying to be a buyer and something like that, and I think some of those issues need to be resolved. But I would say in a larger interest, as what Manu just said, that if you really do not resolve it, then you're basically making it bankrupt and you have no business left and you have only asset left. And therefore, for a national actually growth and dividend income and tax income, it is a structure which works very quickly is very important. And with a bad bank and ARC having a right regulatory framework to raising capital, to buying 100% of the debt, and to also being an applicant, a resolution applicant, I think in my view, it's a win-win situation, creates competition. And I think then people will flock over that ARC, which has the best management skill to resolve the insolvencies and resolve. Because
Mr. Saraf, one quick question before I go to Mr. Manu Chadda. See, in the post-World War II scenario, South Korea had the Chaebols, Japan had the Zaibatsus, which were large conglomerates, which had the financial capacity to absorb assets across various industries. In India, your biggest company itself is not so big. We don't have that big companies. Do you think the emergence of groups like Tata, Adani, Ambani, to some level, have ensured that they can provide financial stability to a lot of stress assets in the company because they have good standing relations with the banks and operational creditors at one level, the employees at another, the dependent ecosystem around those companies, they all get benefited when assets can be swept up?
Absolutely correct. I think it all depends on how companies grow and how they manage risk. I think the biggest companies are not the companies which grow faster, but the companies who manage risk. And some of these business houses like Adani's and Tata's and Birla's have shown how to grow with managing risk. And yes. ARC is similar. Remember one thing. So I think what is important is Adani is asking for an ARC to be set up. It does not imply that the entire asset which is part of the ARC now is owned by Adani, because they'll be very different. So I think and we are getting a little confused because this is not Adani can, when you are resolving it, this ARC can sell assets to Adani Group. But otherwise, this asset sits in the ARC before it gets sold. So I think what is important is when you have good corporations who are also the founders and promoters of ARC, and I think the regulations have to probably, the government has to look into and RBI has to look into the regulation. But once they have it, so in a way, you actually have like, you remember the InvIT. What is the InvIT structure? That you build an asset and sell it off to InvIT and get cash for a developer. Now you can possibly, with Adani's and Tata's and Reliance and others sitting on the promoter side, the ARC can actually sell, after resolution, can sell it to the companies and get cash and then do more resolution. So in a way, it can work like a very interesting structure which can work in resolving resolutions.
That's a good perspective you shared with us. Mr. Manu Chadda, in the infrastructure and the real estate space, how do you see ARCs like Adani's and others shaping up the ecosystem in India? NCLT is one process, but we also know in many cases, companies may go into liquidation because there are simply no bidders. Because in that same sector, not many players have the bandwidth to bid for assets. So how does ARC help that cause in sectors where there is no bandwidth in the peer group? They have simply no money to bid.
So what I'll tell you, Tarun, the problem with the infrastructure has been that they are long gestation periods. Yes. We needed loans for 15, 20 years, which were not available in India.
Yes.
These are long gestation periods. You may have profit in the balance sheet, But if you have a cash flow problem, you are bankrupt. If you have a cash flow issue, no problem. You may have no profit or loss. Your project continues. So the problem has been arbitration, claims, environmental issues, state level regulatory issues, which prolong a project. Our cash flow mismatch has led to a lot of bleeding in the infrastructure and the real estate sector. So obviously, ARC, if it has deep pockets, and then a large group like Tata's, Adani's, or Birla's, or some of the other good groups, they have management bandwidth. They know enterprise risk management. They have leadership qualities. They know how to handle tax. They know how to handle productivity. They know how to handle production. And they also can raise capital abroad. So one of the innovative idea which I thought I should share with you is that if an ARC goes to a bank, and the bank is not likely to deal with the existing NPA promoters because of 29A, because there are issues, they don't want to deal with the promoter. So ARC goes to a bank, the bank determines the fair value of an NPA through a Swiss method, completely transparent, Swiss challenge method. They find the value is 100 rupees, fine. The ARC is able to convince its lenders, fine, we've got this asset, we've talked to the bank, they don't want to deal with existing promoters, management changes, nothing is going to any company law board or NCLT. They buy the whole asset, they deal with the promoters, they fund it, they turn it around. So even directly they can buy without going to the court. So there are many innovative ways, and I think the government is going in the right direction with the bank and bad bank and the new NCLT, the new corporation, and with large groups who have management. Because what happens in the banking sector is they are dealing with deposits, advances, employees. They have their own treasury, they have their portfolio, they have their own capital raising, they're giving dividend to stakeholders. How can they manage bank, NPAs? And ARCs, like I agree with Mohit, they have been, they've taken over, but they have not been successful in actually passing it on. They've been sitting on them, and the value is getting eroded. So we need quick resolutions, people with deep pockets, and people who have the ability to turn it around by having proper management skills.
Okay, point taken. Ma'am Ruby Ahuja, in the litigation space, we see a lot of litigation where a private contractor is litigating with the government for payments. It is fairly common in the NHAI. There are other issues with the states also. So there are a bunch of companies whose financial situation isn't that good. They are in the litigating space with the government, and there is no hope for money because you arbitration, then you again go into litigation. So it takes a large amount of time. Do you think this lot of companies are sitting catches for ARCs where, these promoters can get in touch and they say that the financial situation is untenable, but it's a good asset. If somebody like you take over, for example, Adani or any other group, it could be good for the asset. Do you see these kind of things happening with large players entering the ARC space?
Of course, why not? Because you see what is happening today, that especially in a lot of BOT projects, you have been seeing that, look, not only the money is stuck at an arbitration stage or under a Section 9 stage, you're also serving the bank loan. So you're virtually earning nothing and you have to serve the loan also. So at this stage, of course, the asset is very good, and the entrepreneurs, who may not be as big as an Adani or a Tata has lost the capacity to do more. Maybe his or her resources are completely exhausted. So at that stage, they will be certainly looking at an ARC, some sort of a model from a big, corporate house, and they will certainly go for it, because I have been seeing in the past that, and I have spoken to a couple of people who keep on saying that they just do not have they can't take it anymore because the money is getting stuck. Now, what are the reasons? We know, let's not get into those, but whatever they are, the problem comes, not only if your money is stuck, the problem is that on the same hand, you have to serve the bank loan. Because if you don't serve the bank loan, you become an NPA. Then what do you do? So nobody is interested to become an NPA because your valuation goes completely low. So they will certainly look for certain offers from an ARC. I think the problem, what we'll have to wait and watch, it's a very, very, very good move, and we all are happy about it, that there is an asset takeover, but how fast is the resolution? See, you can take over an asset, you can buy a loan, you can buy a debt from a bank for even the largest business house in the country, but how fast you resolve, because what I see that the delay in resolution the liabilities keep on increasing. Maybe one financial creditor will not fight with another financial creditor, but there are other liabilities which keep on cropping up in a company which is not doing so well, or which is going through some losses. So I think there the trick will lie there to wait and watch and see how faster the resolution comes. And
Okay.
I think there the expertise of a big business house does come into play. See,
Okay.
anybody can, you can buy a loan, or you can have a one-time settlement. And let's talk if I talk in a layman's term, you can have, debts can be tackled in that way. But that's not, I don't think so that you end there. That is not good for any economy. I think what you have to go is to go one step further and resolve it also, so that company stands up on its own feet, and then economy will.
Okay.
You end it there, then economy doesn't benefit, in my view, because you have to then churn more, because there are other NPS. As Mohit started in the beginning, economies will grow, NPS will also grow. So this cycle will continue.
Okay. Point well taken. Now, as we see today, Adani has applied for an ARC license. It will be a matter of days when we come to know when the ARC starts. We of course know that the government has started a monetization program where a lot of foreign investment, it is looking forward to sell a lot of tolled roads. So this space, in a sense, the asset space, will see a lot of action in our country in the next, say, about 16, 17 quarters. It's going to be a really exciting time. That is why we also see players like Adani's getting into this space. Will it start a kind of a beeline with other players also seeing this as a lucrative, people who are cash rich businesses wanting to start ARCs? What expertise can law firm provide in these areas for ARCs? What will the role of the law firm? We will discuss in our next episode. But I would like to thank Mr. Mohit Saraf, Managing Partner, Saraf and Partners, Manu Chadda, founder of TR Chadda and Company, and Ruby Ahuja, Senior Partner with Karanjaval and Company, for taking our time at a short notice and joining us on this very exciting topic of a new ARC from the Adani Group coming up. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.